the way it can change the role of all our HR teams and organizations, taking away transactions and administrative burden from them, giving them more time for looking at the more value-add strategic work, and most importantly, for our stakeholders, the business leaders and the people in our organization, enhancing the employee experience. I think that is often a point that gets missed out in our drive for more digitization and automation. So, with those few opening remarks, I'll request Aditya to come in and talk a little bit about just setting the context on how we see this play out in the pharma industry in specific. Aditya?
Thank you, Sunit. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for giving us the platform to talk about some of our experiences and stories with respect to this topic. Like Sunit mentioned, we as Accenture see a lot of action happening globally and also in India in terms of how life sciences and industry is changing. And there are some learnings that we want to share with you today, and we hope to keep the session interactive. But before we move to the content, there are a couple of questions we thought we'll put to the larger group, and there is a small input that we would need from you. It would go a long way in terms of customizing the experience for the session. So if I may request you to pick up your phone or laptop and go to menti.com and type in the code that you see on the screen. And if you can't, just let me know. 71 72 43 1. And there are a couple of questions that we have for you. First, we wanted to ask, as HR leadership, as HR community, what is the most pertinent issue in today's scenario which the pharma industry is facing, right? There are some of the options that we have kept for your consideration, and it'll be great to get your thoughts and responses over here on this. Okay, we have some 8 responses, 10 responses with us.
Yeah, it's seeming a very split word, actually. Yeah, all of these issues are quite pertinent, it seems.
Yeah.
Very well.
Okay. Last 30 seconds for people who have not been able to log in the responses. Great. So no, this is very interesting. First of all, I think a lot of people have identified each of these issues as important. But one key takeaway that I am drawing out of this is if I look at number 1 and number 5 together, right? And number 2, so there seems to be a lot of conversations around, how work and productivity and hence the associated cost in certain ways. Some of these three are interlinked in certain ways. Seems that this is one of the key questions that all of you are thinking about. All right, so let's move forward with your permission. One more question before we dive into the session. So what are your expectations from this session? I know you're spending an hour and a half with us. What would you like to hear from us, cover as a part of this session? And we'll try and ensure that we address some of and capture some of your expectations as we move along during the presentation.
quite a lot of focus on best practices, right, around digital HR transformation.
New ideas, digital HR transformation, best practices. These seem to be the top 4. There are other variations of that. Understand best practices. Okay. Let's last 30 seconds.
It's quite interesting, Adi. One of the responses I think is also survival plan. And when we get to the Q&A section, maybe we can have a discussion around that as well. What exactly do we mean by that?
Yeah. But this is a great mix.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether we will be able to cover all of these from this session perspective, but at least we'll try and cover some of the big ones. And if we are not able to touch upon some of these, let's come back to this, and we'll be happy to hear from you during the Q&A session as well.
Sure. I think especially around new idea. I mean, my expectation is, and looking at the content that we have, my belief is that there will definitely be at least a couple of new ideas that you all could take back to your organizations. That'll be a good test of the session also. To be honest, around the range of HR solutions and ideas we'll be showcasing today.
All right, Ritesh, let's move. So the third question is, there are some use cases that we have got as a part of today's session. We just wanted to check with you, is there a preference and a priority that we can get from the group, and accordingly, we will try to sequence some of these, focus more on the relevant use cases that you may want to hear more about. So if you can again look at your Mentimeter and talk about it, give your preference, that'll be great. All right. Last 15 seconds, and then we will move to the next topic on the agenda. I think there was a comment on chat. Let me know if my voice is clearer. I'm speaking much closer to the mic now. If not, then I will figure out some way to address it. Thank you. Thank you, Sushil. Okay, let's move to the next one then. All right. So first of all, thank you for sharing your thoughts on these three questions. I think it helps us navigate and anchor the key messages on the session and keep it very relevant for you. As Sunit mentioned, the first topic that we want to discuss with you is, what is the future of work, workforce, and organization, specifically in our industry, in light of all the changes that we are seeing. So let's move forward. So, first of all, let me talk about what's the big change in the life sciences industry when we look at the global picture. If I really think about and what our research shows, life sciences industry till now have been one of the slower moving industry as far as catching up on digital transformation is concerned. There were various reasons for it. This is not just an India phenomenon. This is something that we have seen across our global clients. Um, uh, if you look at other industries like automotive, retail, some of these industries have been significantly disrupted and changed their dynamics and ways of working in terms of how they have organized themselves, in terms of the kind of practices around organization and people that they have had to adopt in order to be relevant. For multiple different reasons, life sciences industries has been able to buck this trend, or let me say, they have moved relatively slower to some of the other industries, right? But we see, and this is a reality which is much more stark in the post-COVID world, um, the industry is moving towards transformation. And there are three big trends which are driving this transformation. One, the socio-economic trend, right? We know that healthcare expenditure is rising. If you look at India, we actually spend only about 2% of our GDP on healthcare. In US, it is about 15 to 17%. All the studies say that with aging global population, lifestyle changes, the healthcare spend will reach about 20% of the global GDP by 2025, right? It will be driven by high cost of caring. And obviously, this will put its own pressure both on the consumers, the government, and we will have to figure out a way of bridging this gap and ensure that we come up with a sustainable solution in order to control cost and help the wider industry operate in the new paradigm, right? So that's the big trend. Second is on healthcare consumerization. Now this is something which is not just relevant for life sciences industry. We see how we interact and consume has got significantly transformed with the advent of the likes of Amazon, Uber, Facebook, and expectations from consumers are very, very different, right? We are seeing consumers becoming much more open to try new ways of consuming services, and it is the same for healthcare services. You look at India, now number of doctors who are going for online consultation, tele appointments. Some of these were just not thought that we would be able to see in such a short time. I know, my uncle, he's a heart patient. He actually wanted to see a doctor, and, the doctor spoke to him over phone and he said, no, there is no emergency. And, I'm not really seeing any patient one-on-one without it being a critical case. And we have to go for online consultation. Consumers are also becoming more and more accept are accepting of it, and that's how the world is going to move forward, right? So the other aspect is in terms of how they are going to consume medicines and a lot of other care around various services and products. And third is around science. Again, how companies are looking at R&D, how digital therapeutics are starting to achieve outcomes compared to classical treatments. Our research shows that genomics enabled specialized medicine are expected to contribute 52% of the top 100 product sales by 2024. So all these three big trends are going to drive the transformation in our industry, right? And it will obviously have an impact on how organizations need to change and be ready in order to lead during this transformation. The second, obviously, the from a companies in life science industry, the end goal has to be to enable better outcomes for patients, right? Patient centricity is going to be the mantra. Gone are the days where we just look at our organizations as manufacturing companies who are going to get to a scale and ensure that we only drive efficiency, effectiveness, and cost outcomes. We will have to look at our companies evolving from just selling products at volume to delivering solution and patient outcomes. That's the way the industry is heading. I'm sure in your respective organizations, you would have also seen some of these conversations coming to the fore. And again, it again cuts across the value chain, right? When we look at, how science is going to drive breakthrough result, how, patient are going to consume various services and medicines, how payers and regulators are going to interact. And finally, looking at the whole life sciences space in the context of the larger wellness ecosystem, right? Again, there are various research that says that, instead of just cure, focus is going to be on the larger wellness agenda, right? And hence, in light of these transformations that the industry is facing, our view is that HR will have to augment its role to impact certain outcomes. If patients are going to be at the heart of this transformation, we will have to look at, how our organizations are set up, how our employees are skilled in order to ensure that they meet the new realities and patient expectations. And fundamentally, there are four key outcomes that that HR is expected to drive. One, reimagine how work gets done. Again, I spoke a little bit about this earlier, but fundamentally, automation from all studies show is going to take up a lot of transactional work and mundane tasks and free up a lot of bandwidth for people, right? We have to brace up for this reality. Obviously, I'm not putting some doomsday scenario that there will be a technology that will make humans redundant, but we can safely assume that AI and associated technologies is going to disrupt in the way we are currently executing our work. Man and machine will have to work together and collaborate. And in certain ways, it will ensure that the kind of work we do is going to be very, very different from what we're looking at today. We have to be ready for that, right? Second, how do we drive outside innovation in? So what it means is the life cycle for innovation is going to become shorter. We already see the whole startup ecosystem. You can't only depend on your organization's resources to drive innovation. We will have to look at how do we build startup mindset? How do we drive innovation by looking at the wider ecosystem and really build a differentiated approach and a partnerial approach to get to the outcomes that we want to, right? We will have to retool and reskill. And this is again where HR comes into the picture. We spoke about, how new technologies like AI, machine learning, analytics are going to come much more to the forefront. And, if, and as in when this happens, how do we ensure that large workforce that we employ are ready and are able to move in sync with some of these changes, right? And finally, how do we transform the employee experience? So there will be going to be a shortage of talent for certain segment of skill sets. The world is moving towards a gig economy. The expectations of the new generation from their employer and organizations are changing. Life sciences companies will need to create a tailored and end-to-end journey for their employees in order to attract them and retain them. And hence, a lot of experience will have to be much more personalized, one-on-one, and relevant to an individual, right? So these are four key areas in light of the upcoming transformations where we think HR has a key role to play and ensure that your organization navigates and move towards this with certainty, right? So that's number one. Okay. Second, this would also require, the HR leadership to follow what we call as the 4B strategy to evolve to a future workforce and workplace. What we call as build, buy, borrow, and bought, right? And we'll cover a little bit of detail on all of these. So by build, it's essentially, how do you ensure your own organization develops capability in-house within the existing workforce and makes all the necessary investments in order to be ready for the next wave of transformation, right? Buying is fairly self-explanatory, but we will, like I said, there will be a shortage of talent around certain critical skill set, and how you find a way to attract and retain the right employees is going to be very, very critical. Borrow means that you will have to look at workforce and talent beyond your defined organization boundaries. We will have to look at adaptive or liquid workforce, as we call. We will have to look at our ecosystem partners, which includes our vendors, suppliers, startups, and identify, the best fit in terms of employment models and skill set that we should be able to tap into from an organization perspective. And finally, when we come to bot, we all know and heard about robotics and AI, but we will have to look at how technology is something that we are not scared of, but is something that is going to be more a reality of life, and how humans and machines are going to coexist and we enable that is going to be critical in the overall journey, right? So those are the four key big trends that we see that the future workforce is going to evolve and move towards. Okay, these are some of the examples. I know we are a little short of time, so I'm not going to go too much into detail, but essentially by each function, it really talks about what are some of the key skills which are going to be relevant from a future perspective, and hence what are some of the new roles that we see organizations will have to build and be ready for, right? So when we typically think of commercial function, we will have to look at roles like experienced designers, right? So look at today's market scenario. Commercial organizations, our reps are not necessarily going to be able to visit doctors, especially in more tier 2 and remote areas, and won't be able to physically cover the network that they used to, right? So you look at our patients, how do we engage them, how do we ensure that we create the right user experience and journeys, and deliver it in the new paradigm is going to be critical. What COVID has actually done is given us a quick glimpse on how world could be 5 years down the line, right? Some of it obviously is not going to be sustainable, but some of the changes are going to stick, and how do we equip ourselves and be ready for this change is going to determine how strongly we come out of this, right? So this is just an example of how some of the skills and roles are going to evolve. Again, from a buy perspective, we will have to look at how overall employee experience is driven by, right? So we will have to look at how employees are working in an organization. In terms of working from home is going to really be a reality of life. A lot of companies, especially in the services domain, have already spoken about it, that the likes of Google, etc., that a significant part of their workforce is going to continue to work from home. How is that going to drive engagement and productivity, and how HR enables them is going to be very important. In terms of access to tools, data, again, financial services industry is a good example. Nobody thought that the entire financial services ecosystem, which moves trillions of dollars of money on a daily basis, could work virtually, but some of these things are happening today. And the way it is happening is because all the right technology, tools, security aspects are taken care of, right? But again, in terms of your ability to attract and retain the right talent, human interaction is going to be equally important. How do you ensure that we have in our talent ecosystem the right experiences delivered to our employees, both in the physical structure and in a non-physical structure is going to be critical, right? So this is where again HR comes in. This is again an example of, you know, how future could look like, you know, not really planning to deep dive too much into it. Tish, if we can move forward, please. Borrow, again, I spoke about some of the examples, but you know, these are just some of the avenues where organizations will have to think about when they're thinking about the whole talent ecosystem. We will have to look at our strategic partners, you know, when we are looking at clinical research organization, vendors. We will have to look at labor on demand. So there will be specialized firms, consulting firms who will come around to your organization around specific requirements, specific project and objective. You know, there will be you know, some surgeon capacity that would be required, certain niche skills that would be required. You deliver a project, deliver the outcome, and move out. You know, organizations have anyway started collaborating with a lot of academic partners, not just in the area of research, but a lot of other topics, and that's going to become more and more prevalent going forward. And finally, you know, on technology, right? So looking at how startup ecosystem can work together. This slide really talks about, you know, how the human and machine are going to work together. So there are certain tasks which are going to be execution driven, which are going to be repetitive, voluminous. Those are tasks which will be amenable for automation, and you know, this is where technology will come in and disrupt, right? Which is what we see in the execution bucket over here. Humans will continue to drive a lot of strategic conversations, something which will really shape how organizations are moving forward, which is what you see in the top right. But a bulk of the organizations will have to figure out how technology and human work together, how humans are able to leverage the best of the tools available at their behest and ensure that they drive the right outcomes is going to really determine how we are successful from a future perspective, right? Okay, and yeah, so there's a short video we thought just to bring some of these concepts to life that you may be interested in looking at. So Ritesh, if you can just play that. Okay, let's move forward. So yeah, before we move to the next section where we will see a lot of these concepts coming to fore in form of use cases, the final message that I wanted to leave with this group was, CHROs will be one of the trifectas along with CFOs and CEO to drive transformation and value for their respective business. And now let's move to the next section and see, how some of these um, use cases are going to come to fore. All right, so we want to cover three key use cases. One is on intelligent operations and employee experience. Second is on digital HR. And third is on connected worker. Uh, so let's look at intelligent operations first. It really talks about how digital is enabling solutions which are helping organizations manage transactions much more effectively and unlocking significant value for businesses across, HR, finance, IT, procurement, and some of these functions. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to talk about, how the role of operations or shared services has evolved when we look at the global picture. Traditionally, in the past, a lot of companies were leveraging outsourcing or shared services driven by following factors that you see on the left. It was largely done to drive cost benefit. The key focus was on centralization. How do you ensure that you are able to drive standardization across various business units, geographies? How do you manage multiple nodes of centers and network that you have in your organization? And the big focus was to bring a culture of performance management, governance, and control, right? As organizations became large, as organizations expanded to multiple businesses, as they expanded to multiple geographies, these were the factors which were really driving the conversation around, what we refer to as the business process outsourcing, shared services, and operations, right? Uh, However, as technology has moved forward, and some of the low-hanging fruit on cost centralization, standardization has already been captured by most organizations in today's world. What is moving the needle now is what we see on the right, right? Organizations are looking at shared services and operations to drive their digital agenda, right? Again, given that a bulk of transactions could be housed centrally, and hence organizations' ability to drive digital adoption becomes much easier, right? How organizations are leveraging organization operations to drive, employee services and experience, right? Create a more agile and capable workforce. And the conversation has moved beyond cost and looking at the whole value ecosystem. And again, this is something that I can share because Accenture does a lot of work in this area. In today's conversation, whether it is with Indian organizations or with global firms, a lot of clients are looking at cost is more of a hygiene factor. It is, how organizations can look at driving some of the key business outcomes around revenue generation, around customer satisfaction, and some of the associated metrics. Okay. So this really talks about, how the journey for shared services and global business services has evolved over the last few years. So what you see, number one, we started with discrete shared services, right? So it was always driven by one function or one business unit in an organization, which started to look at, how they can leverage shared services. Like I said, largely it was to look at cost as the key value play. The focus was on getting labor arbitrage, and hence it was always done in pockets in discrete forms, right? The next step was to move to a multifunction shared services. If obviously it was driven by if one part of the organization was getting such benefits, and there was a push from the leadership, from the rest of the organization that, why some of these best practices cannot be adopted by the wider organization, right? So very function specific shared services models started emerging. finance, HR, procurement, IT were some of the leaders in terms of moving towards this agenda, right? The key benefit was you could drive towards common process way of working and harmonization, and really, you started emergence of some foundational automation tools coming to the picture. The third step was really the global business services. Here we have looked at, obviously the focus was on end-to-end process move. We started looking at global process owners cutting across both the outsourced entity and the retained organization, and really driving one single agenda for an organization. There was a lot of use of digital use cases at scale, and some of these were driving a lot of benefits and business outcomes. And what we are coming towards is, what we call as intelligent business services. And this is where we will see a much more widespread use of all the technology and digital use cases that we see. And again, how human and machines
Hey,
can work in
Aditya,
synergy,
sorry,
right?
Addy, maybe we should get into the case study now. I think conceptually.
Yeah, let's get into the case study. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. So Ritesh, over to you. If you can walk us through some of the examples that you're working on.
Sure. I think, Aditya, one of the reasons why we believe this entire intelligent operations example here is very pertinent. Because in the chat window also we saw a couple of questions around automation. When we were doing the prioritization as well, there also intelligent operations was, I think, the second highest rated area. And I think the key there is essentially this whole thing around work from home, agility, remote working, giving a lot of push towards ensuring that at least the backend operations that do not require you to be at the forefront, how much of that can really be digitized, automated by the use of technology, right? The reason we chose this particular topic is that there is more and more focus in terms of having your operations, whether it is for HR, finance, supply chain, procurement, not just looked at as a traditional shared services concept, but one that is powered by technology, right? And the case that I want to take you all through some work that we are doing with this chemicals organization. It's one of top 5 globally, based out of India. We are, as we speak, working on this assignment wherein we are automating a lot of their back office operations, finance, HR, procurement, supply chain, that entire piece of work wherein S4HANA, SAP Success Factors, the likes of Ariba, iValua can provide a very strong platform, and you build a lot of workflows even on top of it, so that the extent of manual work is minimized. Now, what happens when that amount of manual work is minimized? You deliver extremely high levels of productivity to the extent of a 30 to 35% reduction in effort, and hence reduction in manpower cost. Take that, just have this applied on your manpower cost across these 4 functions, right? And you can have a very strong value case by ensuring that you have the right technology delivered by people who are doing roles where it's very clear that X is a strategic role and Y is an operational role. If it's an operational role, there is a potential for automation and productivity, right? So an extremely pertinent example. I also have a point on the chat window in terms of whether this is pertinent for HR and for the pharma industry. And I think very, very good question. There is a pharma client in India itself wherein we actually deployed this intelligent operations model for finance, right? Brought in the best of technologies at a very core, brought in the best of SAP to have the right platform, then deployed technologies such as WIM, which is vendor invoice management, have technologies wherein the PO to PR generation fully automated, no manual intervention itself. 3-way check between invoice entry to invoice processing, so that again the time that was spent in validating some of these checks, doing these journal entries, can be made automated. Now, what are the applications of this in HR? Jigar, why don't you move to the next slide? So intelligent operations for HR, this particular client that we are talking about, right, across 8 key process areas, we brought in the best of digital technologies to deliver a 20% efficiency in terms of both operational metrics as well as productivity metrics. For example, recruitment, right? The time that it takes today to go through 20 CVs and rank them in the order of their suitability to a fitment. A bot can do that with a more than 70% accuracy if you have the right level of job description and the right level of CVs, right? So automating this JD to CV match very much possible can bring in tremendous amount of productivity. Just look at number 7, the first item there, a CHRO dashboard. All of you are from HR, right? The amount of time it takes in our experience and basis what we've seen in terms of just putting together a monthly MIS for HR can vary anywhere between 7 days to 14 days. If you have a good CHRO dashboard, which for this client we built on top of their SuccessFactors platform, at the click of a button and real time, day in and day out, you would have all the requisite metrics live flowing through in this dashboard. So the time that was being spent in creating these MISs, right, is now essentially spent in reviewing, finalizing and fine tuning them, taking decisions. Again, a classic example of around 2 man weeks every month that were going in and making this reporting has been totally eliminated, giving you extreme amounts of productivity improvements. Similarly, exit management. There are bots that can deliver this exit analysis at the click of a button without any human intervention. Let's move on to the next slide. And this is enabled essentially by a host of technology platforms. Some of these, as Sunit mentioned at the start, some of these are standard global products like SAP SuccessFactors, Workday, Oracle, or some Indian products which act as a core. And then on top of it, for specific processes, we can have bolt-on digitizations to bring in either productivity improvements or an enhanced employee experience. Most of us would be familiar with the likes of HireVue and Talview for digital recruitment, like ServiceNow for answering queries and building custom workflows. For query management, you can have chatbots. Some of these we will showcase in a bit to you. There are vendors like Yellow Messenger who can deliver some of these solutions. Reporting layers built using Click or using Microsoft Power BI applications as well. So a lot of these technologies to bring in extremely high amounts of productivity and employee experience. Let's move on. All of these, by the way, are extremely pertinent to HR as well.
Let's take a logical break here, Desh, and unless there are any more questions in the chat window, now let's maybe tell the group that now we're doing a deep dive into 3 specific areas, right? Desh?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go on.
Okay, so under digital HR, we want to showcase 3 use cases to you, right? Maybe I'll start with the digital recruitment, then move on to chatbot and then to learning. Why don't we start the digital recruitment as a journey, right? In terms of how you can use a set of use cases, leveraging technology and process to build out a process that's seamless and that suits your best interest. I want to play a video here. It's called DICE, Digitally Integrated Candidate Experience. It's something that we are trying out and using in our Accenture operations or the BPO facility, where, as you can imagine, right, the attrition is in very high volumes. Hence, the hiring is also in very high volumes. And I think there are a lot of learnings and relevance for this for farm as well, right, where we have to hire a lot of MRs. And your sales teams at a very fast pace and at a very quick time. Let's just watch this video and try and absorb how and what all elements will be relevant for
bringing together technologies of the future and applying them now. Our endeavor is to integrate 6 independent technologies to provide our candidates with a digital experience. So let's roll the dice and see what this integrated experience of these technologies are. First is Avature, a technology that smartly reaches out to the external world to source candidates from multiple job portals. At Accenture Operations, we use it to attract and engage with top talent. Once Avature reaches out to these interested candidates, next comes our bot. It engages with candidates, manages their queries, and guides them throughout the recruitment process. The third side of the dice is our recruitment backbone. After 2 years of significant changes, Abacus is now completely digitalized. Today, we reap the benefits of innovation and are capable of filtering candidates while making our process systematic and compliant. Using HireView as our fourth technology, the HR interviews are now smart interviews, a platform that empowers candidates to take the initial rounds of their interviews at their convenient time and place. Through this, we aim at overcoming the geographical barriers, reaching out to a larger audience, and providing candidates with an exceptional experience. Talent of the future is the fifth side of the dice. As Accenture Operations is building capabilities to evaluate all candidates on the basis of 6 traits, namely learning agility, innovation, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, tech savviness, and domain skills. These are what we believe our future employees must possess. This is the biggest transformation in the hiring landscape, and through these gamified assessments, we will be able to evaluate and hire the right talent for our businesses. The last side of the dice is the integration of Aadhaar, a government-sponsored identity verification tool to make our recruitment process secure and compliant at every step. With minimal intervention, these 6 technologies are helping us build a faster turnaround time while focusing on providing our candidates with a phenomenal experience. Together, we call it Accenture Operations DICE, Digitally Integrated Candidate Experience.
Thank you, Jigar. Now, folks, let's just take a step back, right, and just appreciate the relevance of something like this in the times that we are today. Business is still happening, right? Maybe hiring volumes have gone down, but firms are still hiring. That's what we're seeing across industries, and especially in pharma. Now, imagine a system like this, a solution like this, which is bringing in multiple technologies to seamlessly generate the kind of recruitment experience that it does. Authenticity, identity security is taken care of by having an integration with Aadhaar. Technology is helping you make the right decisions by doing a CV ranking first, then by leveraging video analytics. For example, if you are all seeing me here delivering a session, the way I'm modulating my voice, the way I'm modulating my facial expressions, video analytics is giving the interviewer a choice and a parallel ranking in terms of competencies that your firm uses, mapped by leveraging video analytics, right? How wonderful that is to augment human decision making, especially ensuring in these times you still have access to a wider funnel because you can have more CVs screened in lesser time. Especially in these times, you have access to a ranking based on a machine learning engine and a RPA that's giving you power to augment your own decision making, and finally ensuring that safety and security is taken care of by integrating something like Aadhaar for India. So very good example how digital recruitment is really solving a problem that's very pertinent in this most post-COVID era. Let's move on to the next use case. I think maybe one more point here. I think what is, this slide 39. What is really pertinent is, so what do you need from an organizational perspective for this, right? I think you need essentially 2 things. One, a core HRMS, not precious about SAP SuccessFactors. For the client that we were working with, they were using SAP SuccessFactors, but a digital recruitment system would work equally well for an Indian HRMS like Darwinbox, Zing, anything, or the global products like SAP SuccessFactors, Workday, or Oracle. But you do need the right kind of bolt-on solutions, whether as we saw in the Accenture example, something like a HireView or an assessment platform like a Pymetrics. You do need good bolt-on products deployed above your HRMS, and then a seamless journey so that this digital recruitment comes to life. Let's move on now. Let's move on to a second use case. Again, something that we are seeing more and more organizations using. In fact, there is this a very nice article and from Gartner, which says that by 2022, at least 80% of the application releases will have a strong use of chatbots. Just play this back to what we are seeing in our real lives as well, right? The amount there's hardly any banking site which does not have a chatbot. There is hardly any food delivery app that does not have a chatbot. There's hardly any mobile provider, mobile services provider that does not have a chatbot. Now, all of the businesses that we are interacting with as consumers are basing a lot of query management around chatbots. Now, same is more and more happening within organizations as well. Let's take the example of a HR chatbot, right? And plenty of solutions there. But if I just try to share, a broad categorization of chatbots are available in the market. Essentially two categories, right? Transactional bots and conversational bots. Conversational bots are supposed to mimic, I reach out to HR when I need an answer to a particular question, right? That kind of functionality is what a conversational bot addresses for you. Then there are transactional bots, right? Bots that help you process a particular HR transaction. If you need a particular credence letter, your proof of employment, for example, if you need to apply for leave, that kind of use case and functionality is essentially covered under a transactional bot. And we are not saying that these are two different bots that you need to have. Depending upon your company's bot strategy, you can decide to have one single bot as the interface to deliver both of these. There as well, multiple products available in the Indian ecosystem. Amber, which is serving a specific use case around engagement. Yellow Messenger, which can pretty much deliver any use case around what that you want. Senseforth, Lena AI is a very pertinent one. We use this when COVID started. No, they had a very nice bot they had come up with, which was to ensure all the information available, which is WHO approved, making that available to each and every one of your employees at the click of a button. That's a use case that Lena AI was delivering. Even now, it's seeing a lot of traction to ensure that as an employee, I always feel heard. That's the power that this kind of a bot can give you. Let's look at a demo again, less content, and maybe let's just show you one of my favorite bots that I've seen everywhere, right? And this is the bot that we use as Accenture. This is a solution that we've taken to other organizations as well. But let's just see some kind of functionalities that it can deliver to us. Now, at least for me as an employee, right, bulk of my high volume queries are in the area of what is my leave balance. If I am an employee in Gurgaon, what are the holidays applicable for me? Now, by integrating this bot on top of our HRMS, we have access to all of this information at the click of a button. At the bottom, you'll see a thumbs up or a thumbs down sign. This is essentially because this bot continuously learns. If I just do a thumbs up on this, it is essentially telling the bot this is a good answer and you should keep repeating it. At the same time, if I do a thumbs down, it essentially tells the bot that this is not the best way, it's not the best answer, and at a particular time, we can get these things corrected. Now, if you see the two queries that we just now wrote in here are examples of a conversational bot, right? These are questions that would typically come to someone in the HR, either via a phone call or via just a personal interaction. and hence we are saving that time that was spent in answering these queries on the one hand, and on the second hand, offering employees a digital experience. Another use case here is that of a credence letter, which is more example of a transaction, right? All of us, we get queries from our employees in terms of generating certain proofs of employment, proofs of residence, etc., etc. Right? In this case, and oftentimes it takes at least 1 to 2 days as a standard turnaround time in what we can go back to our employees. In this particular case, right, you would notice that before Jigar actually ends this chat, the credence letter has been generated and sent to him. Let's see this. Right? What can be faster than this? And this is not even, you know, something that's futuristic. It's out there, available at the click of a button. We can get these letters with minimal interventions from someone in the HR team. We all don't realize it a lot of times, but the client that we were working with, right, we did an activity to quantify the effort that's going across the organization in just generating these letters, and that was to the extent of 1.9 FTs, right, two entire manpower across the year invested in generating different kind of credence letters for the employees. Deploy a bot like this, have the right kind of integrations, you've given yourself productivity and an extremely fast digital experience to your employees. Works
Yes.
wonders in most of the organizations.
Ritesh, let's move to the digital learning. I think there's some interest in upskilling, reskilling. I saw on the chat window. Let's move to that. I think we've seen this. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's
Jigar, let's move us to digital learning, please. Yeah.
The previous slide, please, Jigar. Yeah. Now move on. Yeah. Next slide. Right. So when we talk about learning in these digital times, right, there is definitely this need to upskill at large, right? We're seeing a lot of trends that focus on the fact that digital skilling is the need of the hour. And when we say digital skilling, it's a term that essentially means two things. One, using digital as a medium for learning, and two, imparting skills that are digital in nature, right? Equipping and helping our sales force to work virtually, to use the apps that we have for SFE, order taking, having conversations, getting coached, tracking targets, having PJPs that are available at the click of a button on your mobile phones, right? So it could mean both of those things. And there as well, the approach that we are seeing working most pertinently in the Indian space is a customization of this 70-20-10 principle to more digital ways of working, right? Learning all the time, learning from others, and formal training, wherein essentially the last two, which is learning from others and formal training, are essentially what has replaced your erstwhile classroom or your physical coaching programs, and now these are delivered in more mobile friendly, anytime, anywhere kind of ways. Another key trend in this area is that the attention spans have really shortened, right? And hence, more and more learners are preferring to consume bite-sized learnings, wherein the course imparted or the curricula, the content imparted at any given time has to be less than 20 months for the retention to be the highest. Now, how are we doing this? Let's move on. A key trend, four key trends here in the area of learning. We'll go through one by one, and then I want to cover one video focused on AR, VR, how that's being used in the pharma industry and beyond as a learning technique, right? Creating this immersive experience using augmented reality and virtual reality, almost placing an employee in an atmosphere which is very close to his work atmosphere, unsafe conditions, if we may say. And how do you teach the candidate the right nuances of safety is a classic use case for AR VR. Second, There used to be a time when the strength of or the prowess of a learning organization was the amount of content that you had, courses that were customized and extremely built from scratch for any organization's need. Now that focus is going away, and we are seeing more and more focus on curation. You have multiple learning experience providers, learning platforms, which have a wealth of multi gigabytes of content available on any given topic. So the real task is, how do you as a learning organization curate content from these different sources to offer the right learning journeys to your candidates. Number 3 is an instructor and the value that an instructor brings in going away. Well, not really. It's only reducing and it's only changing from an instructor-led training to
So Sunit, this is Yash. Just a time check. You know, the whole idea of doing this was that we wanted some interaction also. Okay. Otherwise, it just becomes a monologue.
Sure. Let's just move on.
You and the team, yeah, because we won't have even now 20 minutes left. We have less than that, just 15 minutes left. So I'm just, I know this is fantastic. It's really going well, but to make it meaningful, let's make it interactive. Otherwise, it's becoming a monologue and too much to digest. Yeah.
Point taken, Yash. I mean, we'll wrap this up in 2 minutes and then open for question answers.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Sure, Yash. Jigar, let's just move on to the last use case that we have, which is connected worker. Move on to the next slide, right? So essentially, this is the use case that essentially focuses on, the other part of HR, which is sometimes not given enough importance, if I may say, right? Which is around our workers in the plants. How do we ensure, Jigar, if you could please move to the previous slide. How do you ensure the typical issues that are facing this set of our workforce in terms of safety, in terms of productivity, audits, time ghosting, or automation of manual tasks? How do we bring value to these use cases, leveraging, now come to the next slide, leveraging the best of technology that's available, RFIDs, BLEs, Wi-Fi's, and biometrics, right? Just move on. Now crafting a story out of these using as a key technology and building BLE or RFID cards, we've been able to have, see a lot of traction. Just move on to the next slide. The next slide further. Yeah. If by having these devices and this technology solution placed across the premise of your plant, you can have 2-3 key benefits realized. One, always knowing where your employees are. Now, I can understand in a pharma industry, safety of employees is a key factor, because damages can be very difficult, both at a personal level and at an organizational level, right? So you can have a continuous tracking solution, which we are seeing a lot in the industry. Continuous tracking solutions to always know where your workers are. Are they at the designated place of work or somewhere else? Now imagine if you do know this, you can have a very good idea about their productivity also. In this particular example, I mean, we've seen productivity improvements to the extent of 10%. Time ghosting, right? Your contractor will tell you, I'm giving you 100 workers each day, but is that really 100 or is that 98 or 97? So that's another example where we've seen time ghosting to the extent of 3% using these connected worker solutions. And finally, also around safety, right? There are a lot of cases where people are doing double shifts just because it's not the easiest to get workers on time and every single day. So having a connected worker solution, a host of benefits in these 3 areas, in digital eras, in these times that we're living in, this is another very, very key trend that we are seeing to drive digital HR.
Ritesh, let's stop here. Let's take a pause. Yeah.